the Center for Innovative Technology and Mach 37, Virginia's Cyber Accelerator, present Uniting Women in Cyber: Leadership, Innovation, Inclusion.
So it's really an honor to be here. It's an honor to be introduced by Amy, who, like me, has just taken on whatever comes next and enjoyed it. It's an honor to be here among all these other great women, people that I have not seen in many years, it seems, but it's really a pleasure to get to see. You know, Arlette and I agree with everything you said. This is not computers, it's people. Computers aren't smart enough to do what the world is doing to us in cyber today. A little bit of background. So they asked me to share today. They asked me to do two things. One is leave enough time for Q&A, so we'll do that. But the other is share some personal stories that wouldn't be in the bio. And kind of, you know, how did we get here? And when I think about cybersecurity, I think about all those hands that went up. Raise those again. Who's in computer science? Thank you for asking that question. So this is amazing. I was, I think, one of the only women in computer science when I went to school, and it wasn't that long ago. And I think it's really important. So bottom line up front, I learned this in government. Say your thing really fast in case everybody has to leave or loses attention. Two things I want to really point out. One is there is so much opportunity in this field. So much. We face an adversary that has all the money they want. They have absolutely no lawyers. They have no free society they have to defend. And they get to do whatever they want. They execute with an alacrity we will never enjoy as decent human beings. Obviously, they've never been up against a woman. We have a world of opportunity to take back the internet that we all have built and to build it stronger. And everyone in here, whether you're in computer science or in PR or anything that's arts and sciences or music, by the music is math, or anything related, you have a role in cybersecurity. I tend to focus a lot on the computer science because, like everyone else, it's what I know. Someone once taught me that if you look at a PowerPoint slide, look at the person presenting it, and everything in the middle is about them. Try it, it works. But I'll focus a little bit on the computer science. But my second part, there's opportunity, there are also challenges. Don't let them stop you. I can share some funnies, but there will always be people that say, they need a woman for that job, that's why you got it. That's not true. That's them having wanted your job. There will be people that say, you can't do that, or you're not good enough, or the whole team's going to Hooters, whatever. That's a true story. A colleague shared that with me the other day. Whatever, I'm allergic to chicken. I mean, I don't care. It doesn't matter what people say. Your brain was born to do whatever you want with it. Don't plan out necessarily what you're going to do. Let your career take it where you want to take it. I learned this stuff from my dad. He worked at NASA. Anybody watch the show Seinfeld? Yeah, so up above Tom's Diner is actually a NASA office. And he worked there when I was very, very little, and then they moved up to Goddard in Maryland. But he helped build some of the operating systems that launched the Apollo rockets, then took the A out of his agency and went over to the NSA, and I have no idea what he did. He tells me he led the supercomputing, the high-performance computing work. But ever since I was little, I saw blinky lights. This is truthfully how I got my interest in technology. So fast forward, my mother, when I look back, I thank all the women before us that didn't get to even consider going into the field that they wanted. It wasn't they couldn't be in technology. They couldn't do what they wanted. And my mom has an amazing gift for architecture. She can sit down and draw a 4-story house that moves. It's incredible, without any tools. She used to show me when I was little. It's amazing. She was not allowed to go to architecture school. My grandfather didn't let her go. So she's a mathematician. She teaches, and she taught high school math in some bad neighborhoods in New York, too, so she learned how to fight. Maybe not literally. And then when I grew up, this is what I wanted to do. My father taught me this, and circuits and cars and all kinds of things. And as someone else on my team, also a woman, my deputy, who co-leads the cyber practice with me, she also had the same experience I had. Her father had no sons, so here we are. But I wanted to go to engineering school, and I wanted to go to Johns Hopkins. And my grandfather told my mom, nope, women don't do that. And my mom said, no, it's my daughter this time. So when I think back, yeah, thank you, Mommy. So when I think back, there are a lot of people that made it possible for us to even have this conversation and that are going to continue to cheer us on. Someone calls you a nerd, embrace it. I'll tell you a story about one of my best friends to this day. She's a brilliant attorney. She was my roommate at Johns Hopkins, and she took the 5th year off, and I took the 5th year to do a master's. So we had different schedules, right? So one Thursday night, she's out, of course, and I'm in the computer lab, of course, and she was dating a lacrosse starter, and if you know anything about Johns Hopkins, that's what they do. They love their lacrosse. That's what we're about. She brings him and his friends, these really cool guys, to see this is what my roommate does. I can't make this stuff up. And I'm sitting here debugging C code that just for the life of me wouldn't work in a sweatshirt with my hair up, mortified. And it turns out she brought one of the lacrosse players that actually wanted to know who I was. So girls, ladies, women, computer science is not going to keep you from having a really good time. They will come to you. Use your brains, right? When you think about maintain your core skills, because any part of this large field that we call cybersecurity, I love the panel on the EQ, it's really, really true. And if I'm going to start thinking about that more, when am I using my people skills and not my techie skills? You have to know your stuff, whatever your core field is, whether it's chemistry, physics, English, you just have to know it and bring it to the table. There are so many stories, and there are some from my team in the back and some that I used to work with in government, and please don't laugh at me for when you think about these stories, but it helps to know how stuff works. It helps to know that 20 years ago, the word cyber didn't exist, except maybe 25 years ago, except in a big machine called the Cyber 205 that was bigger than this room and couldn't do what your iPhone can do. And somehow this thing morphed into a field called cyber. I don't even know why we call it that. But everything's connected. If you can't eat it, it lights up and it has logic and it has the ability for that unbounded adversary to give it an instruction, and it pulls the next instruction, and it does whatever it wants. And we're coming into a world now, being a little bit serious for a few minutes, when you think about cars and airplanes and toys and all the gadgets we have, and all the gadgets in your home. I won't use any specific names starting with an A. That thing is listening to you. It helps you to know how these things work. It helps you to know, to understand when you enter something on the internet, where it's going. It helps you to understand how, when you see a picture or a movie on your machine, someone's executing their own code on your machine. And when you have some piece of a technical background and you walk into a situation, this helped me every single day of my government and private sector career, just understanding a little bit about how something works, a little bit more than maybe somebody else who's competing against me in the private sector, or even worse, somebody who's competing against our country in the government. And you think about how you address that. I think diversity is very, very important. And I really resonate with what Linny said, and I'll expand. This is just my own perspective. When you try to solve a problem, you can't get infinite resources, whether it's money or people. You put a group of people around your table, and this is what I do when I build teams, where everybody brings a different perspective. And your solution and your product's going to be better. So if we're not including most of 50% of the population, which may even be far smarter than the other 50%, but if we're not including them in the discussions, we are at a huge disadvantage because other countries do. And the enemy does. The adversary doesn't worry about whether you're a man or a woman or a tropical fish. If you want to help them attack something or gain money or execute their will on someone else's critical infrastructure, they don't care what gender you are, what race you are, what you look like. Game on. And so we have to do exactly the same thing to solve those problems. Are there challenges? Of course there are. I have endless humor stories, as does my team, of how all these things come together. But in the end, you have to overcome that. And I know that's easy to say, but I'll give you an example. And as you go through experiences, it helps you. I ran a very large board of directors for a very large volunteer organization, a labor of love for everybody that was in it. And at one of the very early board meetings, somebody on the private sector side actually raised his hand in this big meeting of the board of directors and some representatives from all over and said, so what does it take to be on this board besides a pretty face? Yeah. So the room gets quiet, and you think of something. Everybody can do this. You think of something. You think of something that makes you sound really confident, like I think I went off on something about the structure of our, bylaws, right? And it sounded all like I was confident. We ended it. 15 years later, you know what I would have said to him? A nice behind. People like that do not deserve, always be polite, always be diplomatic, but people like that do not deserve to rattle us. And they will, but they don't deserve to. When you think about other cultures, about 2 years ago next week, we were invited, I did part of the cyber negotiations with the Russians in Geneva. And as we sat across that table, I worked for an amazing woman, Undersecretary Suzanne Spalding at the time. So first of all, they see two women come in. This is astonishment number one. And then she did something else the next day, and I took over the senior position of the meeting, but also had the subject matter expert spot. And I didn't think that anything had been weird about this, except for two things that happened after that. One is, it seems that they feel free to mess with you. And I don't know whether this was a woman thing or an American thing, but it was the first day of Passover. And the Russian ambassador leaned forward to me and asked why we were keeping, or quote, keeping certain of his people before they were prosecuted. And I said, sir, you know, that is the issue for the DOJ. I'm here to talk about this piece. And he looked at me and he said, let my people go. It's hilarious. They'll mess with you. But the second part was when his assistant got up and asked me after the first part of the discussions. He said, you're a woman. I said, yep. And he said, you're at the expert table. And I was just thinking to myself, right again. And you know, you just say yes, yes, you're at a diplomatic meeting. And he said, ah, but you're also at lunch. Lunch was for the, quote, seniors. I said, yep. And he said, huh, and he walked away. Different cultures expect different things, but as long as you know your stuff, which everyone at that table did, they can't touch you. As long as you can counter their arguments and explain what you need to have done and hold your ground, they can't touch you. One of the best things I can say is something I learned probably during that time at DHS, if not just a little bit before, but my old boss used to say, insecurity breeds dysfunction. So if someone is, or even you, feel insecure, first of all, just fake the confidence. No one's going to know. But when you get in front of one of these characters that thinks that you can't add something, or you don't belong there, that is their insecurity. And I promise you this, because I've never seen it not work, give them enough rope to hang themselves. Go with it. Be polite. Don't ever lose it. You can lose it to your friends. You can write an email that never has something in the send. But don't let them ever see you lose it. It will make them get more and more upset, and eventually they just self-implode in front of a lot of people. That's what other people do when they have confidence. And I see people get, and I fall in these traps all the time, but I recognize it a little bit more now. And people taught me this a long time ago, my dad and others. Don't fall, and my team has helped me for this too. You can imagine in government you're surrounded by, you manage a team of 2,000, but you're surrounded by the 7 that are most important for you, that really have your back, that know more than you do, and can keep you out of trouble and give you good advice. A couple of them are back there. But think about when you're in these situations, you have so much to bring to this, so much to add to this field from every different aspect. You know, it's such an honor to be here when you think about the innovation in Virginia, right? All the things that can be done here with our proximity to DC, our proximity to Baltimore, the great schools that are here, the great mind share that's here. As you participate in that, we need every bit of you that we can get, every aspect of this field, because right now, people are building more and more great toys that people are buying and not locking down. That's the techie in me. It's the techie in me whose father used to buy museum toys with the gas in it, and they flash, and they spin in the light, and he puts it in the microwave to see what happens. When you find yourself in a situation where you think you're right and you know you're right, or you get bummed out because someone has either insulted you or it's just frustrating because you can't get it done, the best thing you can do is work harder. I shared with my team the other day, I was second year of Georgia Tech. I did grad school on my own. The car was 15 years old. You can imagine this. It wasn't that ugly, but it was pretty ugly. Had 180-some thousand miles on it. All of a sudden, at the beginning of the summer, the battery starts failing. Now, my dad, total tech nerd, says to me, it's because you're bringing it on short trips. You're just using it to see your friends. What else is a car for? And should I have to run around the Beltway every night to make sure it's charged in the morning? So he would start jump-starting it. My friends found this funny. He'd have to come get me after work. If I stopped to get frozen yogurt, which I do a lot, it died. And one night, he just said, well, we'll charge it every night. It'll be fine. And one night, Mom came to me, put out a bunch of food that she knew I really liked, sat down and said, if you don't think for a minute that I understand that plugging a car in overnight, this is before Tesla existed. She said, if you don't think that that I understand that this isn't normal, you're out of your mind. And she said, if you and your father don't solve this, that car's not going back to Atlanta. I didn't want a new car. Number one, it would just get stolen. How many were at Georgia Tech in 1996? Yeah. But number two, I just wanted to do it on my own. So I snuck down to his side of the basement, the nerdy side with the power tools and the car stuff, and he used to keep the shop manuals. There's an encyclopedia that's issued for every car they make. Only, he has them. So I went down and I pulled it, and I went through the steps as if I was the mechanic, because that's what I was taught. It's technical. Just do it. Figure it out. And I had taken the car in, and the man had said, it's fine. I checked the whole charging system. He rolled his eyes at me. He said, I promise you it's fine. You're just abusing the battery or not using it right. And he looked at me like I was dumb, and I told my dad this, and my dad said, I'm sure they checked it. Well, you know what? According to that manual, it was the alternator. Everything pointed to it. And I went down to my dad, and I told him that, and he said, no, I'm not going back there. They said, I've been there. I like the guy. I said, really? Because the manual right here says you have to take the battery out to fully check the charging system. And he said, and you think he didn't? And I said, no, the clock's still set. And he said, no, a good guy will set the clock for you. I said, 7 minutes past? Like it's been for 2 years? So my dad bought me the mother of all alternators and owes me a lot of ice cream for the rest of my life. But you just have to work harder, because even my dad, that would never stop me from doing anything, just didn't believe it. And that man at the charging place just took all of our money and didn't think that I would ever notice. And for 6 weeks, I drove a car around that needed a charge every 12 hours. So you learn. You just learn that there are going to be people out there that look at you and think you can't do it, but my God, you can, and you will. And one of the most important things you can do is to remember that, and to remember that every piece of talent that you have is going to offer something very, very important to this field. One thing I learned early on, just because when we take this stuff on, we work with a lot of good people, like yourselves, no one ever does anything alone. So in the theme of the conference, Uniting Women, unite in your personal experiences. Tell your personal stories. Figure out, you'll look back at them a few years later and you'll actually find them funny, I promise. Not all of them are about just being women in the field. Let's just talk about being in the field for a minute. This field moves very, very quickly. In my old job, I had 2 or 3 of the gentlemen, they must have been over 85, and they were sitting in our skiff, and I think one person back there was with me. And I said to them, there are no windows in here. No one will ever, if I tell them, know that I asked you this. But did you ever think about security when you invented the internet? I had the ARPANET guys in there. And he looked at me and said, yeah, I did. We didn't need it. And I said, well, I thank you for the job security for most of the population for the rest of our lives. But you start to wonder, what do you mean we didn't need it? We need to take the mind share we have in here and think ahead. We need to get to be that part of the population. I love that slide before. Folks who've seen my office know this. I like shoes, but I also like computers. Right? We need to be that part of the population that can do anything we want, and that's okay. I have a joke with my sister that when I get my hair blown out, it covers up my little propeller, and she's okay with that. Because it's nice and big. But it should never be a limit to what you want to do. It doesn't have to be in technology, but this field of cybersecurity will go toward understanding, for example, I have a couple of beautiful nieces. I don't want their pictures anywhere on the internet, and that's very, very, very sad. Right? I don't want to have to explain to my niece why, but they are growing up in an era of technology where they'll go ahead and message something and send something, and hey, it's just going off, and hey, I'm texting this and doing this and showing where I am. My gosh, don't do that. And you think about what's coming next and what is electrified. I rented a car when we were at DHS. This just shows you something else my mom used to say, be careful. Be kind to your web-footed friends. A duck may be somebody's mother. We're driving in a Hertz rental car. And I look up at the, quote, GPS. It's got a little camera. I thought it was kind of funny. So I took a picture of the camera and sent it to the head of Civil Liberties and Privacy at DHS and said, what is that? And he came back. He said, well, that's interesting. We have to think about things. We need all the mind share in the world because the technology that we have today is getting far, far out ahead of us. Every device you have, besides the privacy and the data implications, think about the electric grid for a minute. The fact that all of those different electronic components that speak, they don't speak the internet protocol that sends your email. It's just bits of light. It opens and closes circuits, and it creates different logic gates, and power flows. That's some pretty cool but dangerous stuff if it's used the wrong way. And you know what? The adversary is embedded there. So how do we take that back? How do we take the mind share that's in this room and other rooms and do what my mom and everybody else's mom has done for us and get more creative about that and think about that, not only in awareness, but how we're designing stuff. There are laws right now being made that look at how do we take some of the electronics out of the grid? Because it's safer if we do the thinking as people, as the prior panel, without the computers, because we can't control the computers. Another big thing that I do want to touch on is communication. And I joke about this with my team. I joke about this with people I work with. You can't speak Klingon. No matter how smart somebody is or what they know, if you can't communicate it, it's useless. And people won't want to work with you because it's too hard to understand. And I will say I learned this lesson the really hard way. But I now call it ducks and bunnies. And I got that from another colleague many years ago. But no matter how complicated it is, you've got to figure out how to present it so that somebody that makes a big decision, whether it's political or diplomatic or money, can understand what they're talking about. And the great example is our work both in public and private sector with the great people that make our laws. It's almost funny, but it's not, and I've joked with certain senators about this. For them to try to understand what the heck goes on in a computer program so that they can make laws that help make these things safe is unbelievable. Their staffs are trying to come out of school and help them interview people like all of us and figure out what's going on so that we can make the best laws and the best policy. And they're not there just to talk about cybersecurity. They're in Congress and the Senate to talk about every issue we have. So the little bit of their time they have, we have to figure out how to help them learn a lot more about it so that the policy isn't over-regulatory, but it gives us the things that we want, and it helps guide those computers. And the very people that write the articles and joke about Robot Nation, oh no, it's coming, get real. Learn how to communicate what technically you can do in a very simple language to the people that are actually making the policy. Or even more, you can take that techie background and go make the laws yourselves. You can do anything you want with that computer science background or any background that you have. And it would help a lot if we unite and go ahead and do that in the area of cybersecurity. Right? I can go on and share lots of funny stories, but I will tell you that there are so many people that support each and every one of us so that we can enjoy what we do. Don't let anything stop you. When I looked at how I was going to come into this, yeah, my dad taught me computers. Yes, that's what I wanted to study. But when I went to grad school at Georgia Tech, it was to study high-performance computing, which I did, for weather forecasting. We actually predicted tornadoes better with lots of data. And my summer internship in cryptography paid better. And I had that car, and I was doing grad school. This is not a joke. And so I went into cyber and became the first cybersecurity PhD out of Georgia Tech. Met a lot of the alumni who were trying to figure out what on earth I was doing and why. And here we are. And so you never know where stuff's going to take you. And you can't thank enough or depend on enough the great people that have helped you. And I mean that to my team, who I'm not going to call out and embarrass, and to everybody in here who's going to take every woman in this world and every person in this world forward. Just keep your core skills, communicate, know that nothing ever good happens to anyone alone. We're all in this together. And please have fun. Love what you do. Thank you so much.